You know, I've been a fan of Mystery Science Theater since the early '90s, and you know, the fact that you guys are now over onto this, you know, new version Rifftrax is awesome. And I love these Rifftrax live because I get to meet all the other fans who love everything you do as well.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it's always people talk about it as a really social event because you just don't run into Rifftrax fans just on the street at the grocery store. You have to be in the context to recognize it. So it's fun for people.
Tell me about how you guys went about picking out this film, Jack the Giant Killer.
Well, we'd always been limited to movies that were sort of our genre, you know, the Reefer Madness and Plan 9 from Outer Space. And this one kind of came up as an option that we didn't know about. And we screened it and thought, you know, man, the fantasy aspect of it, it's kind of fun, but it's also very cheesy in a sort of serious way. So it was that was perfect for us. And also a nice big color film that sort of entertains on its own is a little bit of a help because, you know, in Plan 9, there's a bunch of scenes where two guys will just walk into a room and start talking to each other. And, you know, it's funny through most of the stuff, but those scenes always felt like, oh boy, this is a drag. And this movie really, you know, keeps pace the whole time.
The action scenes always seem to, the crowd gets more involved and there seems to be more excitement. I remember during Reefer Madness, during the part where the guy's going, play faster, play faster, play faster.
Yeah.
There just seemed to be more laughter in the crowds during those riffs.
Yeah, it's really helpful when the movie can do some of the heavy lifting for us. I mean, it's our job to make the whole thing funny, but it's really hard to elevate some moments that are just, like I say, they're just dreary. You know, what can you say about it? So it really is helpful when the movie's fun on its own.
When you were picking out James the Giant Killer or Jack the Giant Killer, was it like how you used to work at Mystery Science Theater, where you had to go through several films and screen them, just watch them before you found the right one, or did this one come out right away and you knew you wanted this one to be the next Rifftrax live?
Yeah, we've gotten pretty good. You know, you watch the first 5 minutes of something and you pretty much get the mood of it, and you can really tell, you know, we know now who makes these movies. So, oh, this is, you know, what's his name? It's not going to get any better. This is one we hadn't been familiar with, so we screened it all the way through. And it's a process that's a little more technical where you have to be pretty diligent about, you can't just sit back and enjoy it. You have to be, now, did they stop talking so that we can talk here? Is it paced well? So this one, though, it was fun all the way throughout. So it was pretty easy decision once we watched it.
Is it profitable for you guys doing this? Are you making just as much as if you were to put it out as just a regular Rifftrax?
Yeah, it works well for us because we get so many requests to do the live shows and tour. When are you guys coming to New York? When are you going to do this? And it's just because we have to run our web business, that's where we, you know, that's our bread and butter. We have to keep that going. And if we went on the road and did these tours, it just wouldn't, you know, we'd neglect that part of our business. So this works out well where we can sort of reach out on one night and do it. Now, not everybody can go to just one night, and that's unfortunate. But, you know, we feel it's the best way, sort of the best compromise. We'd love to meet all these people in all these different cities, you know, face to face, but it's just not practical for us. So this sort of is the perfect touch of live show for us.
Oh, I guess I want to talk a bit about the MST days, and I guess the first thing that comes up is I remember reading an article. They were talking about the top cult television shows of the past years, and Mystery Science Theater was in the top 10, and you had said a quote like, you had been at some sort of theater and all these people were chanting about Mystery Science Theater under the age of 20, and you were like, how do you people see this show? At what point did you realize that Mystery Science Theater was the cult show of its time, or becoming a cult show of its time?
Well, it's funny, in the early days, we really felt like, you know, we were doing this to a handful of people. And I do remember walking across the University of Minnesota one time and hearing one of our catchphrases pretty early on. I mean, we didn't make it a catchphrase. It was just a repeated phrase in a movie that we thought was funny. And we heard some kids saying it to each other. And that was just like, wow, that's pretty neat to get that feedback. But the fact that it lasted after its run was always a surprise because, you know, we didn't try to be topical or anything, but it was of the moment. We just made it, wrap somewhat quickly, so you just assume, well, that's the end of the run and that's it. So it's been neat to see that it's continued on, and I get a lot of young people who said, I grew up with it or whatever, and I passed it on to my kids. My kids running around singing the Hercules song or whatever. It's just, it's it's a strange but it's a really great feeling to know that it's continued on.
You bring up a really good point. This seems to be, I've heard a few people bring up, like musicians, like They Might Be Giants and Weird Al. This was something I liked. I got to when I was a kid and I was in college, and then when I had kids, I passed it on to them, and now they become very much a fan, and they're going to pass it down. Do you believe Mystery Science Theater is going to be one of those shows too?
Well, I hope so. I mean, we always fought really hard to make sure that the mood of it was inviting to everyone. It wasn't, there was a feeling that it was a cult show, but that was only because its appeal was limited, on its own, not because we meant it to be limited. Like, this is a secret club that only the initiated can join. I always felt like I'm trying to be as funny as I can to everyone, and so it's nice to know that it does sort of continue on in that way, because that's how it was meant. You know how you can just tell when something's like, oh, I'm not supposed to get this. This is for a little club, and I've never liked that.
Has anyone, either extremely famous or someone who was a big hero of yours, you tell them, oh, well, I used to do Mr. Science Theater, and their eyes just light up and they go like, I love that show. That was great.
Well, I mean, it was cool to all the guests that we've had on Rifftrax have been guys that I've loved, and they've done it not because they're making piles of money or because it's, the thing that's going to lift their career. They did it because they liked what we did. So that was really cool with Weird Al and Joel McHale and Neil Patrick Harris. So that's been really neat.
When you're doing the Rifftrax, I saw on the 20th anniversary, talking about the history of Mystery Science Theater, they said, in the TV show, it was just what was funny in the writer's room. But then when you had to do the movie, you had to go through this whole corporate list of lawyers. Now in the Rifftrax days, is it back to, if it just makes us laugh, it goes in?
Yeah, and the good thing is now we have younger writers too, so that perspective is in there. Well, I just don't get a lot of the references. I'm too old, but we have writers who share stuff with us, and so it keeps me current as well. But yeah, the measure of it has always been what makes us laugh, what do we think is funny. Although there will be times, I admit, when if there really is like a 0.1% chance that someone will get the joke, we'll say, maybe we should broaden it just a little. But for the most part, as long as that's a lateral move and doesn't make it less funny, we say, let's make sure that people have at least some opportunity to get this.
If he ever does put on a shirt, it'll have a picture on the front of him without his shirt on.
And for you, I imagine one of the favorites has to be your version of Roadhouse, because I hear you just about in every interview talk about that movie. Why?
What can I say? It's one of those things, they call it a guilty pleasure for a reason, because you really can't defend it. It's like, no, really, it's a good movie. It's just something that you like. And that's true. We've done a couple other movies like that. We did Birdemic, which is just, some people just say, why? Why did you subject me to that? And they're seriously hurt by it. And I say, what can you say? Certain things make you laugh. And again, I'm not defending it on any kind of grounds of quality or anything. It's just, I don't know, it's just sort of funny.
Is there any genre type of movie that it's harder to do a style of Rifftrax versus, I imagine action and fantasy, it's going to be easier, but is there a type of film that for you guys, it's harder to do?
Yeah, definitely, and it's pretty much Transformers. It's just so difficult to, fit stuff in. The pacing and everything just doesn't allow for you to digest a moment and then comment on it. So most of the times I say we don't let our, strong opinions about a film leak in. If I really dislike a film, it's not really fun to sit there and listen to someone, rag on a film with bitterness. But in the Transformers films, it actually comes through a little bit because we feel like a lot of people feel the same frustration. So that would be one where the anger that you hear is genuine and people respond to that. But generally, I don't think that's a good position to come at a film from.